Welcome to the New Mom Talk podcast, your go-to podcast for evidence-based answers to your burning questions about parenting. Join us as we dive into commonly Googled topics and hear from experts and real moms. Let's navigate parenthood together, one question at a time. Hi, everyone. So today I'm really excited for this episode. We're going to talk about holistic postpartum preparation supports with Dr. Varisa Perlman. So we are going to have all sorts of great knowledge and ideas provided to us for those of you that are looking for just more of those holistic ways to prepare for this wild postpartum stage, because how else can you explain this time in our lives, right?
I think wild is a great word.
Well, I don't know that it's fun.
Yeah, in retrospect, it's always a little bit more fun, but I think wild is a great word just because it is primal. I think wild is a good word.
It goes with holistic.
I'm Varisa Perlman. I am a pediatrician who is in practice for over 20 years. And I actually come from two parents who are both pediatricians as well from Thailand. After kind of practicing both in Michigan and Miami, I actually have moved to New York and decided to become more of a holistic health coach, realizing that in the confines of conventional medicine, I just wasn't given enough opportunity or time to really share with parents and do the work that I really wanted to do. And then most recently, I did a training for postpartum doula work. So that was always the part of being a pediatrician I frankly, I really enjoyed the most because it was very foundational. So that's why I did that additional training.
Would you like to move to California and be my postpartum doula?
In a heartbeat. I think I would really, really enjoy that. But I'm a good age of 50 now. And when you look back and I'm like, wow, that was work that is just so sorely needed to really like cause a great understanding in the culture, in our Western culture of how important those months are.
I know. Oh, and we can totally
We
dive
don't.
into this and like go off a tangent on like
Yeah.
how important it is and how I didn't even know what a postpartum doula was until I
Yes.
started this podcast, which is
Yeah.
crazy that we're just like bombarded with like, you need, this perfect stroller, the perfect crib, the
Yes.
sleep trainers, whatnot, but there's no mention
No.
of what a doula is, what a postpartum doula is, how they're different from birth doulas, and how both can support you.
Yes.
But having you as
Absolutely.
somebody that's a pediatrician, yes, I would want you here.
I think that's the holistic part, right? Because it's all these pieces, right? This piece, the other piece, but not really saying like who's like manning the fort, like who's the center of your life to kind of anchor you during those tumultuous months. And that's the piece that I feel like a postpartum doula like sits in that space that is just unbelievable. The thing that's interesting and to kind of lean back into like traditional medicine is that these people have existed in many cultures for a long time. And we have a fancy name for it, but most cultures they describe that. They described, I mean, some they use words like confinement, which is kind of like an intense term, you know. If you have someone who literally is sitting next to you, feeding you while you're breastfeeding and taking care of everything around you, so that you're kind of the center, the eye of the storm. Sure, there's be a lot of stuff going on, but you are anchored with your child and someone trained to know how to navigate that space for you. That is what you need. And a lot of cultures have that and they recognize how important it is. But the US, we like to have it all, right? We like to kind of do everything ourselves, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
in the end of the day, I think that sometimes we kind of forget the village and shoot ourselves in the foot. As a pediatrician, you would ask, like, why? What is your piece in this? I think for me, because I've always realized how important parents are in raising a child. I'm there for 5, 10 minutes. You're there 24/7. So if I don't care for you and I don't care for your family and help you navigate that time, I'm really not doing my job as a pediatrician. And that's what I learned after 25 years of practice. That there were some blind spots there that I hope to fill in these next 20 years of whatever practice I am. I hope to just keep on infusing, just like with all the work that you do, other people doing, to really kind of flesh out how important it is to pay attention to the parents in those first couple of months.
Well, I love that because I think those first initial months, like one of the biggest things is the emotional and the mental health, right? So,
Correct.
with
Correct.
that said, how can parents prepare for both their emotional and their mental health during this postpartum period? Because you have, especially as a first time parent, you have no idea
Yes.
what to expect, right? You hear so many different stories and you have kind of maybe a version of what you think yours is going to look like, and it's probably
Never.
not going to look that way.
Yeah, yeah. Not gonna look like that. Right. They say like man plans, right? And God laughs. And I always say like parents plan and babies laugh hysterically. Like it's just over and over again. I think that the key when you're kind of faced with an entire, a very like daunting task to try to, how do I anticipate? How do I prepare? I try to make things very simple because frankly, around that 9, 10 month, you really don't have a lot of brain space, honestly. Like you just kind of try to make it through the day. So I try to make things as simple as possible. So basic ideas of Chinese medicine is heal thyself. So I like to bring it back down to basics. Again, going pretty primal as much as we can, down to eat, sleep, stress, right? So a couple little
So,
tips.
all things you forget to do when you are a parent. Got it.
There's so many other lists. Like, do I buy this? Do I get this? And yet, the only three questions that matter is eat, sleep, stress. Pretty much throughout our lives, but especially during these moments. Because, you talked about, physical and emotional, they're not disconnected, they're very much connected. So if we deal with the physical, the emotional follows. I mean, there's parts that we're going to talk about that are specific to mental wellness, but physically, it all connects, right? So let's go eating first, right? So one of the things that is really tricky is that a lot of times women are the person generally in the relationship who's responsible for food. It's stereotypical. There are men who are really like taking the charge, but the truth is that it's a lot of women are taking that responsibility. The reason why that's glitchy is because once you birth the baby, like you are not going to be able to cook for hours. You are not going to be able to prepare that food. You can barely reheat the food. So preparing the food is already kind of glitchy. And so this idea of what do I eat? Okay, do I just order stuff? Do people just bring stuff? Do I just try to make stuff? Do I eat bars after bars or snacks? It's a mess. And so in Chinese medicine or Chinese culture, they'll actually, I would say, kidnap the mom and the baby and like literally feed them broth. Koreans do this as well. And there's a seaweed soup that's in Korean culture. There's a lot of cultures that like have specific foods that are very protein, fluid, fat, veggie dense, and really like minimal sugars, right? Like, and the idea that like you need to, everything that gets in should count. It's not a lot that comes in. Broth is really amazing because it's got that fluid, it's got a little salt because you're not really getting, the fluids that you need, and it's getting some protein and fat kind of all together. I always joke that, they have like the beer hats, where you put the straws in your mouth. I'm like, we should have like a soup hat, like some kind of broth hat that you can literally just sit there and while you're feeding your baby, feed yourself. Because what I tell people, it's like a vending machine, right? Whatever goes in, whatever comes out needs to be replaced. So sometimes even like a basket of things that you can grab, whether it be nuts, trying not to do necessarily bars, right? Because the bars have a lot of additives, they have a lot of sugars, but like, things that you can kind of hold on to and grab while you're feeding your baby. So you can kind of like check yourself. Because I know the minute the baby is down, you're like, well, let's go, let me go do the laundry, let me go clean up this room, I gotta do this. At least I have you anchored, right? I have you stuck with the baby and you can feed yourself as you're feeding the baby. So eating is really important. Sleep, the baby is right now during the daytime, the baby sleeps, the baby's up at night. So basically the baby's in Thailand. So all the babies come out, they're completely jet lagged. That's all it is. Nothing fancy, it's just jet lag. Okay. So what that means is that during the daytime, the baby should not be sleeping in your arms for 5 hours. Like that's crazy because at night they're gonna be like, "Where's the party? I'm up to bed. Like, where I'm in Miami. Let's go out." Like they get very confused. So I often tell people literally every 2 hours, you want to jostle them a little bit, maybe feed them a little bit, and then they can go back to sleep. But what you're trying to do is not allow them to go to REM. Once they pass 2 hours, they start to settle into REM. There's only a certain amount of REM that's allowed in a 24-hour period. So once they use that REM during the day, guess what? At night, they're up, right? They're not really getting into the deep sleep. So trying to like make it a schedule between like 9 and like 7 or 7 to 7, right? Where we wake up, feed, go back to sleep. They don't have to stay awake, but trying to break that a little bit will give us a better chance at night that they're going to sleep longer. And they're supposed to get to their birth weight by 2 weeks. So if they reach their birth weight at night, they can go as long as they want. But until then, you can go 3 to 4 hours at night. You don't have to wake them up every 2 hours at night. But during the daytime, I would want you to, just to get everybody rolling in the same direction. Okay. And then,
I'm going to make sure that my baby gets this memo when they
yeah,
arrive.
we
And
will
I
send
want to
the
be in Thailand.
memo. And then stress, a big thing that we talk about, interestingly, is boundaries. Why are boundaries so important? Boundaries are so important because you are very fragile. You are probably not sleeping or eating as well as you should, at least to keep up if you're breastfeeding or keeping up with actually healing. Say women are like, but I'm not even breastfeeding. You know what? Your body kind of got the crap beat out of it, honestly. Like it's been a long journey. So to even heal, you need an ability to rest and take care of yourself. But if you don't have boundaries, all of a sudden you have a newborn baby and you're hosting, you're getting food for some people, you're, making conversation. I mean, that's not what your job is. And the thing that I love about that I'm going to push into any conversation I always have is that they're born the way they are to heal the family. And I say that because I see families where the parents are not so good about advocating for themselves, right? They're just like, oh, I guess I'll just suck it up, right? But if I say, this will improve the health of your baby, right? I need you to do this to kind of fight for your baby, right? Okay, what do I do? Right? They sit up, they try to figure out, how can I advocate? So if it's just for me, I'm not going to do, but for my kid, yes. And I see a lot of people where, breastfeeding goes sideways, everything goes sideways, sleep goes sideways, everything goes sideways because the parents are exhausted from entertaining everybody else. And I'm like, we need to stop, right? That this is where the line is. You need to start taking care of yourself. You need to ask people to not come over, perhaps maybe until about 6 weeks or 2 months. There are some boundaries that we have to have. Have an inner circle, people that are going to be there, not just to come and hold the baby, to come to your place, to do some dishes, to throw the laundry in, right? To maybe pick up in a room, to cook for you, to bring food. Those are the people that should be your inner circle. But if
Yeah.
someone's, I mean, to me, if I learned anything through that training, that postpartum training, is like what needs to be in your space.
I love that because, yeah, I think that like your first time around, it's really hard to be really good with boundaries. And then,
Yes,
you learn as you parent your first child what you're willing to put up with and what you're willing to say, no, this is not going to work
yes,
for our family.
yes. And I believe that the thing that's tricky is the idea of how your partner and your support network should look like, right? And I think it's really important to understand that it's exhausting to quote unquote always be the bad guy, right? I would tell them as a pediatrician, like, if you want to use my name for any rules that you want to make for everyone to not come over at like 3 days old, use my name, right? And tell them the pediatrician says that I shouldn't be having visitors until this week. Because in many ways, it's exhausting to be like, "Oh, my wife is saying this, my wife." You need a partner that says, we and the pediatrician have decided this.
Yeah, like be
Because,
on the same
yeah,
page.
on the same page. Because families coming from all different, sides. And I mean, with the best intentions. But if you don't think that that person will be coming into your home to help you.
Hi, everyone. It's your host, Mariella. I wanted to thank you for listening and share some ways to show your continued support. You can rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share the show with friends and family. Buy me a coffee to help with the financial costs of running a podcast. Follow me on Instagram at newmomtalk.podcast. And finally, subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you for listening.
Then they can come after the baby's 6 weeks. They can come after the baby's 2 months. But that first 6 weeks is precious. And that isn't the end of postpartum, but it definitely gives you a little time to get your bearings.
Yeah, and to kind of adjust even though you don't really adjust because sleep is
Yeah.
not really
It's, yeah.
settled.
Yeah, yeah. The torture research actually shows that you have to have at least 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep in order to not go like clinically insane. I mean that, yeah, that describes about 6 months of my first postpartum where I was just like, you're quite right. And I was getting blocks of like 2 hours, 3 hours. I don't think that I had a full 4 hours until
Mm.
6 months.
Yeah.
So a little grace with that is really important. Like walking, one of the things you were talking about in terms of like managing it, take a walk outside, get some fresh air because, that sky, that sun, hopefully, is really going to help you recalibrate. Again, we're going primal with it, right? Manage, communicating with your partner to say, okay, I might be breastfeeding, but can you go get the baby when the baby cries, change the baby, I'll feed, and then you bring it back. To have like a team effort can make a big difference. I think probiotics are great. Probiotics really kind of help that flora that's kind of getting beat up by probably some more sugar in your life, probably a little bit less sleep and more stress than you need. And, I think that in many ways, having people come help, yes, sometimes, watching the baby is helpful. But, honestly, if you have a situation where there's people helping, great, they're in your house, they're helping. But also, like, find time where you can, like, sit in a room and just read a book for a little while, right? Where you can have some time to yourself. That's
Well,
just as
that
important,
actually leads me to the next question, which I feel
Yeah,
like you've already kind of mentioned quite a few, but what are some ideas for creating that healing and restful postpartum environment, as well as what can moms use to help their
yeah,
body's recovery? So, what kind of
yes,
holistic
yes.
treatments or nutrition can help them with that recovery? Because, yeah, like your body has been beat up.
I am a big fan of just like some of the basics. I try not to kind of overdo supplements because I think a lot of people will do a lot of supplements, but then like pay no attention to what they're eating, which I think is, kind of not really the right direction. So, the basics, right? You've got your probiotics, your basics, vitamin C, your vitamin D, just to kind of keep everything, you might need some iron depending on how you are recuperating from everything. Fluid, not just regular fluids, but like electrolyte fluids, because there's probably some blood loss, right? So we're talking about the coconut waters, we're talking about the electrolyte waters, the broths, right? Someone coming over and cooking a big pot of something makes a difference, right? Now, nutrition, people are like, well, I'm eating a lot of these lactation cookies, which is a lot of sugar and grain for me. So for me, I'm like, concentrate on veggies and proteins and fat, because I can actually tell how nutritive that breast milk is when it comes out really depends on what you're eating, right? So if you're eating crackers all day, your milk is going to be a little lost, right? It's not quite sure what it's going to have, right? And frankly, I find a lot of women, and that's why I talk about the probiotics, but women and the babies are very prone to yeast issues. So a lot of those sugars will actually breed more, kind of give a nice playground for that yeast. So the probiotics are good and just kind of watching your sugars. The fruits are obviously good, but just be careful that you're not just eating fruit. It's about proportions. Balance is always good, but I'm going to even tip your balance to more protein and veggies. You know how like they have the pyramid, but I'm going to almost flip it, right? Where the thing that they said not to eat that much of, I say eat more of the protein and fat veggies and maybe a little of the carbs, a little bit of the sugars. It's there. It's not like you can't eat them, but just when you're trying to kind of get thick milk from you and also good healing from you, you need your protein and your veggies.
Yeah, I love all of those ideas because those are things that you don't even like really just think about. Like my
Yes,
first time around, I made a few casseroles to kind of help out with like
yes,
the first couple of weeks, but like
yeah.
the soups are just as easy to make. Like
Oh,
make them,
yes.
freeze
A
them,
hundred
and have
percent.
them available. So that's such a great idea that I just wouldn't have thought of. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of like meal service deliveries now for
Yes.
postpartum supports for
Yep. That's
anyone
great.
that's looking into that or that maybe
Yeah.
wants to add it onto their registry.
Yes, that's a great idea. I've actually seen online that they are creating those services and they're really following kind of traditional foods that people have been using for postpartum health. So I'm really kind of, we're just as much as we can. Again, the reason why I say they heal, if you do this right, right, that children heal the parents, I bet you'll be eating better than you did when you were a single person at 25, right? Like in many ways, right? You really are going to feed your body with the richest foods that you can find. And I think that's a great habit. We're really trying to fall away from like a lot of the processed foods. And I find that a lot of moms, because it's just the easiest thing to grab, will just have mountains of bars and mountains of snack foods. I'm not understanding. Like that's just not gonna do it. And so you're gonna find me pushing you into a space where I open your fridge and it's large containers of good soups and stews. And so I think that's a really good one. Fishes are good. Obviously low mercury if you can, right? Preferably. But I think that's a great oil that kind of really helps to make the milk more fortified. I They can notice the amount of fat when it layers out on the milk based on what the mom is eating. And so in many ways, like it's going to feed you just as much as it is for the kid. And I think that, if you start exercising more, but you don't increase your intake and you're breastfeeding, that's going to be tough, right? Because your body's metabolizing more. So you do need to understand that you and this baby are connected in ways you didn't even realize. But even if you're not breastfeeding, your healing is connected to what you're eating just as much.
It's like a full circle, right?
Full circle. Full circle.
Before we finish off, I just wanted to give you a chance to go over any other tips, suggestions, or recommendations that you
Yes.
have for anyone that is really wanting to go more of a holistic route with this
Yeah.
recovery and really trying to figure out how to set the boundaries before they have a
Yes.
baby.
So that is exactly, you read my mind. If I sit down and you're asking me that question, and yes, we've talked a lot about food, we've talked a lot about like, people in your space, but I think the thing that I has have found actually the most rewarding about the work that I do now as a holistic health coach is that while I loved my experience having children, the hardest part about having children was how it forced me to face triggers and traumas in my life. And the truth of the matter is that when you are entering this period, whether it be the way you have to communicate with people around you or ways that maybe your parents raised you in a way that you want to raise your children or don't want to raise your children, right? These are incredible conversations. These are crazy tough conversations. We can't anticipate all of it, but in your inner circle with your partner, someone that you actually feel very good about, you have to kind of like spend meditative moments thinking about, okay, this is going to probably be hard for me. This is probably going to trigger me. This is going to be good about this experience. This is going to be tough about this experience. And how do I deal with that? Who do I communicate with? They did a study of men and women 6 months postpartum, and 80% were clinically depressed. That's a crazy number. That's a crazy number of people who are not always aware, not always like in touch with how their lives have been affected by having a baby.
Well, and I think that you kind of touched on a really important point was just that when it comes to that preparation of being on the same page with your partner, right? Like, because
Yes.
realistically, it anything that happens in your home is going to impact you, your partner, and the baby. So it's
Yes.
you and your partner need to be on the same page before baby comes
Before.
to avoid any like unnecessary
Yeah.
conflict,
Correct.
frustrations, like
Correct. All of it.
agree on when people are going to come visit. Like my husband and I have already
Percent.
we're going to
A
have a
100%.
postpartum doula. Like
Yeah.
we just really want to be able to figure out our life as a family of four and to be able to transition our toddler to getting used to sharing mom and dad.
Yep. Yeah. Just even that. That's a big order, right? And it's confusing if you have five other people in the house running around. You can't hear yourself. As someone who, had, I'll be honest with you, semi-traumatic experiences with both of my pregnancies, and both of my births and my postpartum periods were really rough. But it's interesting because we think, okay, the second time around, I'm going to do it right, but it's that kind of thing that, here you and I are talking hopefully to people who are pregnant And we're like, no, you can make it better the first time around. Like do these things the first, don't wait until the second time. The first time, well, I want to plant in so many people's minds that like there are tools, postpartum doulas, but there's also like your partner and you, and like realizing that those conversations beforehand, wow, they really make a difference. They really make a difference. And my husband and I don't think it was even on our radar. We were so focused on like timing everything else but that. So if I beg of anything for people listening, realize that you have to know your village as you walk in. And maybe that's a conversation with your in-laws. Maybe that's a conversation with your own parents, right? The conversation should be done before the baby arrives, right?
Thank you so much. I'm going to have all of your information linked
Wonderful.
in the show notes. So anyone that wants to reach out, learn
Thank you.
more. I think this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I'm so
Yes.
passionate about like the postpartum like preparation because there's so much you
Uh-huh.
can do
Absolutely.
that I did not know you could
Absolute.
do. So
Again, same. And I wish I would have had this talk for myself 20 years ago. That would have been really awesome. But thank you so much.
okay,
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. You can find us on Instagram for more updates and tips. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a review if you like us.